Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Lads Talking Footy podcast. And as always, it's myself, Sam, joined by Jordan Turner and Simon Anderson. Now, today is a very special day. We've got 17 test matches for the All Blacks, Super Rugby Championships with both the Crusaders in 1998 and 99, with the Chiefs in 2012 and 2013. 3 Rugby World Cups in 2011 and 2015 with the All Blacks, and then again in 2022 with the Black Ferns. A coaching record with the All Blacks of 184 wins, 21 losses and 7 draws. Nicknamed the Professor and renowned as one of rugby's greatest coaching minds of all time, Sir Wayne Smith was knighted earlier this year for his services to our great game. And we're very lucky to be joined by Smithy here today. So, Wayne, I want to welcome you in. And how are you going, mate?
Hi, lads. Yep, going well. Enjoying a nice, calm winter up at Waihi Beach.
Nice.
What you missed out there, Sam. I think I'm the only All Black coach to get sacked.
Yeah, we haven't got that question in there. I'm sorry.
but I'm definitely the only All Black coach to get sacked twice.
Well, my first question for you is, obviously we know you as an All Black coach and your success for the All Blacks in the coaching sort of department, but from 1980 to 1985, you played 17 test matches for the All Blacks at First 5'8". What was your experience like for you wearing the black jersey before ultimately coaching those players wearing it?
Well, firstly, it was unexpected. Like I come from Putaruru, and I was at Waikato University, did my degree there. And I was sort of making a bit of progress with rugby, but I played for my home club in Putaruru. I made the Waikato under-21 team, Waikato Bees. But at the end of 78, when I'd finished my degree, the Waikato coach, George Simpkin, who was a great coach actually, he talked to my under-21 coach and told him that I wouldn't be a first 5 as long as my ass pointed downwards. So this is the end of 1978, and it was probably right at the time. Like I was playing for a small club. I was 74 kilos. Never looked like I was going to do much in rugby, I don't think. But it was a great coaching lesson for me, because you never misinterpret what people have on the inside. You know, you never underrate them. And I think that's what happened. So at the end of 78, I wanted to go to Teachers College. I decided not to go at Waikato. I thought I might as well get out of the province. So I had a choice between Auckland and Canterbury. Chose Christchurch. Had some really lucky breaks there. I was supposed to play for Christchurch Club, but I turned up at trials and they had 97 trialists there. I didn't even get my boots out of the car. And I was staying with some relations down towards Belfast. And Uncle Ginger, he said to me, I don't know if he knew much about rugby, but he said to me, you could go and play for Belfast. They haven't got any backs. I don't think he thought much of me as a player and thought I could probably get in at Belfast. So that's where I ended up. And had a club that really cared, really showed a lot of care for me. Gave me opportunity. I got picked for Canterbury. This was another lucky break. I got picked for Canterbury to play against Mid-Canterbury, but I wasn't in the team. I was on the bench. Robbie Deans was first 5 actually.
Yeah.
In that game. Wow. And it was a lucky break for both of us, because it was the only time in history that Mid-Canterbury have beaten Canterbury. I never got on the field. I sent Robbie down to the Bees to be a fullback, and then he became one of the great fullbacks in the country, obviously. And I got put into first 5. So I played that NPC competition in 1979 after basically being told I was never going to be much good. And I was a non-travelling reserve for the end of year tour at the end of 1979. So figure that. Still wasn't quite ready, I don't think. I played in an All Black trial early 1980. It was possibles against probables. I think I was in the possibles. Played on my home ground actually in Hamilton, which was ironic. and got picked in that team for Australia in 1980. Played. I remember getting my first All Black jersey. It was like you can imagine from the story I told. You can imagine the surprise. You can imagine the feelings going on inside me that all of a sudden, within a year and a half, I'm actually in an All Black team. So I slept in the first jersey. We played Sydney, which was basically mostly Test players. I marked Mark Eller for the first time. I think we drew with them. I remember getting Trish found me really excited because I got the Sunday News Player of the Week and got a poster, I think, a poster sandwich maker as an award. So big prizes in those days. So yeah, I played probably the first 5 games, I think, on that tour because Murray Taylor got injured early on, and played the first test. Played on the Tuesday following the first test, and ruptured my hamstring. So that was the end of the tour for me. But yeah, something I'll never forget. Like it still seems a bit surreal coming from where I came from to getting a black jersey.
Yeah. It's such a short time as well. Happened just like that.
Yeah. There's always for me anyway. There was a lot of luck, as I said, along the way. Different things happened that allowed me to get into teams. The possibles beating the probables was another one. When I got selected, it was pretty brutal in those days, lads. I remember after the trial match, we went into it was at Waikato Stadium. We went to the big lounge under the stand, and they named the team straight away. So you're standing there with all the trialists.
Jeez.
And if you got named, you moved to the left, and if you didn't get named, you went up to the bar. It's pretty brutal. Yeah, so that was my first. Yeah, that was my first occasion with the All Blacks, and yeah, it was surreal. And my whole career was really. I had 17 tests, but I played 35 games. I think I played 35 games because we were on tours more often in those days. So you played midweek games as well.
Yeah.
And non-test matches. And I cherished every one of them. It was something that I thought would never happen in my life, and and I got the opportunity. So yeah, it was pretty special.
Very nice. So we'll move into your coaching career now, and your first coaching role was with the Crusaders in the Super 12 competition, where you won in both 98 and 99, back-to-back titles. One name that pops up in those teams is Scotty Razor Robinson, who you coached. What were your experiences like with Razor, and what have your interactions have you had with him since then?
Well, firstly, lads, my education as a coach was a bit different to everyone else. Laurie O'Reilly had been my mentor since I was first down in Canterbury. He gave me a ring one day and asked if he could have a chat to me about coaching. I said, I'm only 22. I don't know anything about coaching. And I went round to his place. It was a Sunday. Went round to his place. Kay, his wife, let me in, and he was standing there in a dress. I'd come from Pataru. I'd never seen a man in a dress before. It wasn't a dress. It was a caftan. He'd been for a swim, but to me, I'd never seen anything like it. So he got me involved in some coaching courses he was running out at Lincoln University. As I say, I was only a player, but I came across some outstanding coaches from around the world that he brought out. So I was meeting these diverse people. He'd also bring out people from other sports, and I'd meet them. So you're encountering people with different perspectives. It can change the way you make solutions to old problems that you've had. So it was an interesting period of my life. And he started women's rugby in the country, Laurie O'Reilly. He got me involved with coaching the university women and the Canterbury women. So yeah, it was a different probably pathway to a lot of other coaches. And then when I finished with the All Blacks in 86, I went to Italy as a player coach. And so I was a head coach there for about 2.5 years. Played a couple of competitions for a little team called Casale Sorsile. And that was really critical, again, in my growth as a coach, because I was exposed to some French methodology. So Pierre Villepreux became a good friend, who's, I think, is probably the best coach ever that I've come across. Another guy called Andre Bonomo. They sort of took me under their wing, because I was still playing. I was only 29. But they exposed me to a methodology that was different to what I'd been coached by in New Zealand. It was more global, more sort of throw the ball up, play the game, learn the skills that you need through playing the game, rather than teach the skills and then play the game. So it was around the other way. And so, I was learning different ways to coach. I was asking questions of the players, simply because I was a new coach and I didn't really know how to coach. So I was asking questions to try and find out what they understood, what they were doing, why they did it. And I noticed that it created better self-awareness for the players. They were starting to actually, because they were having to give me answers, it was helping my language, my Italian language, but it was also helping me understand the game. And it was staying in their heads rather than going in one ear and out the other. So it was a technique that I started using. And also, having come from the All Blacks, I had this belief that players will rise to a challenge if it's their challenge, but not necessarily rise to the coach's challenge. Because we only, in the days when I played for the All Blacks, I only had one coach, and he was more sort of a manager, and he had to organise the backs and the forwards, and sometimes he'd tell you to take the backs away and you go and do your moves. And so I suppose it was the start of all of us becoming amateur coaches, I suppose. So when I came back to New Zealand, I didn't get a coaching job initially. So I took on a job as chief executive of Hawke's Bay Rugby. So I was out of coaching. I worked there for 3 years, and I applied for the Crusaders job. When they got last in 1996, I put my name in the hat for that job. Actually, I put my name in the hat for assistant coach of Canterbury as well, just in case. And I missed out on that job, the assistant coach of Canterbury. And when Steve Chu rang me to tell me, I said, well, we might as well pull my name out of the hat for Crusaders. And he said, oh, well, the world moves in mysterious ways. And I got the Crusaders job. I'm still not quite sure where that happened, but it did. And then started a journey that was pretty tough. It was fraught with danger in those days. You're coaching a team that had got last, and they already had good coaches. Ozzie McLean was helping coach them. Vance Stewart was head coach. They were good coaches. They'd done well with Canterbury. So it was difficult. You had new players. You had no buy-in from the Canterbury public. Essentially, I think because players were coming in, were drafted in from other parts of the country, and you know what the Cantabrians are like. Yeah. It's all red and black. We weren't too keen on the Aucklanders playing for us. It was difficult, and people have this throwaway line about me at the moment. They call me the professor, but back then I was definitely known as the mad professor, and I don't think I definitely wasn't liked much in my first few years coaching down there. It was difficult because things were so different and we didn't have immediate success. But getting to Razor, so my first meeting with Razor obviously was at training. I was asking questions. So why'd you do that, Razor? And I thought I did the right thing. And I was meaning, what did you do and what did you see to do it? But by asking the wrong question, I was getting a bit of conflict with players. A bit of just tell me the answer. So, but I was a young coach and I was still learning my way, and I hadn't really explained things very well. anyway, I continued on with my way of coaching in the pre-season, and then our first pre-season game was down in Timaru, and I thought I'd go around all the rooms and just shake the boys' hands and wish them all the best for the first pre-season and have a wee chat to them. So I go into Razor's room, and he's got a chair sitting here, and he's over here. Got a chair sitting here with his jersey on it, and so I wander around behind the jersey to shake his hand, and I get to about here, and Razor goes, "Oi, move away from the jersey, Smithy." So I look at the jersey. "What's going on, Razor?" And he pointed at the electrical plug, and he had it switched on. And he said, "I'm getting electricity into my jersey." I said, "You're powering up your jersey." He said, "Yep, making it electric, mate." "Oh, good on you." So that was my first sort of first occasion with Razor just for a game. So I knew immediately that, you know, he was different as a character.
Yeah.
He thought differently. He's a lot of fun. We got on well. I had him in the All Blacks as well when I started coaching the All Blacks. So we go back a long way. Yeah, and I love the way he thinks and the sorts of ideas he comes up with. Some of them haven't always got detail, but he uses other people to help with detail. But he's got a fantastic mind and something that really inspires people. And so he was part of the inspiration in that team that eventually led us to winning the championship.
Awesome. Do those breakdance moves go back a long way?
Well, no, I can't remember that, but he was a surfer, and yeah, he was different. He had different interests to a lot of the others. You know, he'd come from the Mount. He'd already bought an apartment up there. He had his life. I always thought he had his life pretty well sorted. But very creative and great to have in a team. I put him in charge of our attack after training. I wanted the boys to do some ad lib stuff after training, and so I wanted to test the defence. I thought the best way to test the defence is put Razor in charge of the attack, because he'll organise a group every week to do these strange moves and all sorts of things, which is what he did. Like we'd set up the defence, and he'd come up with moves. He'd pretend to drop the ball, and someone else would pick it up and pass it on, and there were all sorts of things. And he took huge satisfaction in breaking the defence in that group. And so I think from then, you know, you could see the education of a coach starting, beginning to evolve, where he had these different ideas and different ways of getting the boys to do things.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Innovation.
Yeah. Moving on to your All Blacks coaching career. In 2004, you returned to the All Blacks as an assistant coach, this time in preparation for the 2007 Rugby World Cup. That World Cup was obviously a tough time for New Zealand rugby. And in 2011, when it came around, it's fair to say we were all a little bit nervous. Injuries were there. We met the French again, but this time in the final. What separated those two campaigns from each other, and what were some of the lessons that you learned from 2007 leading into 2011?
Yeah, it's a big question. But yeah, 2004, I was coaching Northampton in the UK, and after I'd been let go as coach of the All Blacks in 2001, and my family weren't too keen on New Zealand Rugby Union, it's fair to say. They held a bit of a grudge. When Ted rang me to see if I'd come back and coach with him, my wife came flying into the room and going, she wasn't keen to come back, Trish, and nor were my boys, who were loving it over there. So it took a week or two for me to make a decision, and eventually I knew myself. I knew deep down myself that I got let go. It was my own cause that allowed the union to let me go, and I had to, inside myself, I knew I had to prove to myself that I had the guts to come back and face it, and I had the resilience to show that I could stick it out. And so eventually I agreed to come back. and joined Steve and Graham. And we initially in 2004 we were a bit rough. You know, we beat England in a series at home, and we beat the Springboks and the Aussies at home, but we weren't playing all that well. And then we lost away games in that Tri-Nations, and it became obvious to us that there's probably a lack of leadership in the team. And I by no means mean about Tana was captain, but he was sort of left to his own devices a wee bit, as you were in those days. You know, the leader carried a lot on their shoulders. And so we'd had a chat after our last game in South Africa. I think it was, I can't remember where we played, but we had a really important chat. Graham, Steve, Gilbert Anoka, Brian Lahore and myself, about we felt we were a wee bit leaderless. And again, that's not a slight on Tana. He was huge. But there wasn't that culture of others helping him lead. And so we decided that we needed to become a leader full team rather than a leader less team, and thought that we would go to the union and talk to them about putting a leadership group in place. And that was a massive thing to do because, you know, up until that point, All Blacks were selected through trials and through form, and no one was promised a jersey. But if you're teaching players how to be leaders for the team and you've got a small group, there's no point turning them into leaders and then not taking them on tour. And so you've got to be able to guarantee them a spot on tour. So that needed support from the board, which we got. And it was a change. I think it was a massive change to the All Blacks. And it shows, I think, the type of thinking that Graham and Steve brought to the game, you know, and it needed some different solutions because we were just going down the same track as it had been going down. So we got through, like 2005, 2006 were two of the great years. I think that I was ever involved in the All Blacks. You know, we won a Grand Slam in 2005. We only lost one game in each year, and we were playing some really sublime rugby. You know, we'd sometimes win by 40, 50 points. Then we came up with a cunning plan for 2007 called the rest and rotation. The idea was to get the players in a state of fitness before they played that was unique and was the best in the world. So I think the plan on paper was good. The theory was good. But it didn't really motivate the players, you know, and that's the key thing in the equation, isn't it? You need the players to come along with you. So you could tell by some of the comments and talking to the boys, they weren't happy not playing enough Super Rugby games. So when we came out of that competition, we actually beat France like 3 months before they beat us at the World Cup in 2007. We beat them something like 63-17, something like that, in Wellington, I think it was, which doesn't do you a lot of good, you know, in terms of your build-up next time you play them, because, you know, you've always got the subconscious in your mind that, geez, we've put 60 points on this team. But we went into the tournament. We had a reasonably soft draw right through. Don't think Scotland played their top game against us in that game. And so we never really got tested. And then when we came into that French game, yeah, I don't think we were as prepared or as psychologically hungry as you probably would want to be in a final like that. But that's no one's fault. It's just often a carryover from having already beaten the team by a big score.
Yeah.
We hadn't played that well in the tournament. Things hadn't really flowed. We'd been working on a second game plan that we were going to bring in more in the semi-finals and final, which was going to be more work through the middle of the forwards. And some of the players have said since that they felt that was the wrong thing to do. We were doing some work on that for the whole campaign, whereas we should have just been focusing on what we were already good at. So there were a lot of reasons. I think we definitely hadn't put enough time into the drop goal. We were teaching, we had training runs that taught a lot of decision making. We had a great sports psych in Gilbert and Oka, and we'd done a lot of work in the classroom around how do we stay composed, how do we handle the pressure. But following that World Cup, it was pretty revolutionary. That report that came out actually hit the nail on the head, I think, in some areas. Ted, I don't think, would agree totally with that. He has other, thoughts about that quarterfinal. But a big part of the report was you need to measure your decision making. And so the board decided that we would, in the future, have to report back to them on how we were going in terms of teaching better decisions. At some point in that game, we should have been taking a drop goal, but we didn't, and the team wasn't used to taking drop goals. And as Richie said, we always get the penalty. Now, we've been in this situation so many times, we've always got given the penalty, and then we've kicked it and we've won the game. Well, it didn't happen. And so we had to find other ways to make sure that we were in charge of our own destiny rather than just the referee. So we started taking the red to blue ideas of Kerry Evans and Gilbert Anoka out onto the field. And we changed the way we trained. We put the players under huge pressure, so they had to use the techniques that they were learning in the classroom. They had to put it into the field. We were really challenging them, forcing them to make mistakes, throwing in another ball. We were really making trainings difficult. And I think through that period, leading up to 2011, the players became able to handle anything. Initially, there were a lot of arguments, a lot of, Smithy, you're just bloody grumpy. I remember having a session in Ireland, and Daniel Carter talks about this a bit. I've seen it written a couple of times. I was being particularly difficult with the backs, mainly because we were playing at Croke Park, and I don't know if you know anything about Croke Park, but Lansdowne Road was getting a facelift. Croke Park is where they play the Irish, the GAR, the Irish sports, and it's a massive. It holds about 80,000, but the terraces have the blood-stained bricks from the Easter uprising on them. Now you know what sort of crowd you're going to get.
Yeah.
At a stadium like that. And so I was being particularly difficult with the back. I was putting them under huge pressure. They started dropping the ball all the time, and I just kept on at them, kept on at them. And in the end, Conrad and DC got together, and one of them said, "Let's just do a cut. Let's just do a cut, get over the game line, see if we can do that." And it started. We started being accurate. The back started kicking into gear again, and got going from what had been pretty. If you'd watched it, it was pretty disconcerting, given we had a big test coming up. And so at the end of the training, I went and talked to the boys and just asked them, so what happened there, boys? And a couple of them they were ropeable with me, just saying, "Oh, you're just bloody grumpy, you had a bad week." And Conrad said, "No, I see what you're doing. You think Croke Park's going to be way more difficult than this." And I said, "Exactly." And so what did we do? Oh, well, we fumbled, and then DC said, what we did was eventually we went to something really simple, something that anyone could do, and it got us back on our game. It was a really good lesson. I remember that game clearly because we played really well. And afterwards, I went in to see a couple of the Irish boys and into the change room just to thank them and that. And I said, "Hey, guys on stretchers, they had guys lying on the ground, they were battered."
Sheesh.
And I walked into our change room, the boys were having a Steinlager. and apparently the training was way worse than the game. But yeah, I wasn't popular. and there were quite a number of times I don't think I was popular at all for those sorts of training sessions. And I'm a pretty intense coach anyway. So what I did after that was I made sure I explained what we were doing to avoid a bit of the conflict.
Now, obviously, the Rugby World Cup in 2011, we won that at home. What was that like for you as an experience getting to celebrate, obviously, the Rugby World Cup in your home country?
Well, final was horrific.
Yeah.
You put 8 years. We've been together since 2004. Probably shouldn't have got re-elected in 2007, but we did. There were a lot of traumatic times. I got to be honest. Living down in Christchurch, where most of the city or most of the province thought Robbie should have got the job. It wasn't easy.
No.
And I think publicly in the media, we were seldom, we were criticised more than we were given any positives. We were a disaster until we won that World Cup. Essentially, that was the commentary, the narrative. And it was difficult. I found it difficult at times working under those conditions, but we just had to do the best we could with the boys, prepare the best we could. We played really well, particularly 2010 leading into that. There was actually just a quick story, but there was a bit of genius, I thought, from Graham Henry. So in 2009, I don't know if you remember, but the game was like a game of tennis. So IRB had brought in a law interpretation that advantaged the defensive team. So the tackler was always getting penalties, always getting, winning the ball, allowed to do it. The attacking team would get penalised. And so coaches decided we're not going to attack. We're not going to counter-attack. We're just going to get it down the other end. And it was like tennis. There were more than 80. I can remember it being more than 80 kicks in matches.
Damn.
In Super Rugby and around the world. And Graham said there's no way that this will last. So he was looking into the future a wee bit and decided that the IRB couldn't let the game go on like this. And at some point, they were going to have to change the law interpretation. So we decided to keep attacking everything. We went into the Tri-Nations just attacking from everywhere.
Yeah.
And you'll remember we got beaten 3 times by South Africa.
Yeah.
in the try in one season. Got beaten by France because of the game we were playing. We just kept losing the ball virtually every ruck. But we were adamant, no, the game's going to change. And when it does, we're going to be ahead of the ball game. So we go to Europe at the end of the year, play really well. Had a great game in Marseille against France. And I remember Richie and Andrew Hall saying to me after the game, we can see what you coaches are actually trying to do now with our game, because we played a brilliant attacking game. The laws still hadn't changed, but we were getting better at it. And then over Christmas, they changed the law interpretation, and it now advantaged the attacking team. So I felt in 2010 we were way ahead of the field. The first game against Ireland, when they came out, we put 60-odd points on them. They did have a red card to Jamie Heaslip, but we played brilliantly. And right through that year, we played some superb rugby. We won another Grand Slam. And it lasted just long enough to get us through that World Cup. The World Cup itself, it was, I'm lucky to have had 2 World Cups now, because the one with the women, like nothing else. We had crowds outside our hotel rooms constantly doing hakas with flags, and you could really feel the support from the country. And it was just the most amazing few weeks you could imagine. Everywhere you went, there were people supporting you, egging you on. We had motorbikes follow us to the games. We had people cheering at us as we were going to the games. It was a superb occasion, and we grew. We grew as a team during that time. We had a lot of issues, as you know, with injuries. and the DC one was a massive one, but we had Aaron Cruden come in. Actually, when he came in, he had grazes all down his arm and leg. I said, "What have you been doing? You got beaten up in the game?" And he said, "No, I was skateboarding down a hill and Palmerston North came off." But he was great. He was ready for it, and he really added to the team when he came in. But then, of course, he got injured, and everyone knows that Beaver came in. We didn't actually know Beaver was still in the country because he had signed with Bath. We sort of assumed he was overseas already, and it was through Mills Moena that we found out he was still here. And I'll never forget that phone call. I can't remember if he rang Ted or Ted rang him, but we were trying to get in contact with him, and the phone call was classic. What are you doing, Beaver? I'm white baiting. You caught any? Yeah, caught about 2 pounds. Oh, that's a lot of white bait, Beaver. You bring that to room 424 at the Heritage, you can play in the World Cup final. It was literally what it went like. And so, we had a lot of, it was a testing campaign that, a lot of injuries, losing the best player in the world, got the other best player in the world on one leg in a moon boot all week, Richie. We take it off on Thursday, have a bit of a run around, do the captain's run, back in the moon boot on Sunday. We were literally on one leg at one point, but we had enough gas to get home, and I'll never ever forget it because, as I said, it was the 8 years were pretty difficult. Well, I felt they were for me anyway. Living in Christchurch at times, and I was out doing some media after that game, as with Graham Henry and Steve. And Graham had said he was, with 20 minutes to go, he was thinking about a country in the world that didn't play rugby that he could go and live in. he was definitely going to move if we lost that game. And then all of a sudden we've won it. As he said, we smashed them 8-7. It doesn't matter, we won it. I remember coming back into the changing room, and John Key was there drinking out of the cup. And the world had changed. So all of a sudden, we weren't hated anymore.
Yeah.
We were being lauded now as world champions. And, I look back at that whole period from 04 to 2011, we won 89 games out of 103. 89 games out of 103. But we weren't any good until we won the World Cup final.
Yeah.
And that's the reality, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's reality. And having been in this game a long time, those expectations are great because they are the things, they are the reason that the All Blacks are so great and have been so great for so many years. If people didn't expect you to win, you probably wouldn't win, but our country expects us to win. And so, and it was great to be able to do that for them.
Yeah, it's a volatile environment, the media in New Zealand. You're on a knife edge if you're not succeeding, but when you are succeeding, you are legends of the country, and that's what you guys became. Your next challenge was kind of like a full circle moment for you because you came back to Waikato with the Chiefs in 2012 and you won the Super Rugby title against the Sharkies. What was that like, winning the Chiefs' first Super Rugby title it was at the time? Because, it was a great season for them and you had a big part in that.
Yeah, so it was an interesting process because the Chiefs, I had talked to the Chiefs board about Dave Rennie and suggesting that he should be the head coach for them. So this was during 2011. And so they preferred to go for Warren Gatland and try to get him back from Wales. When that failed, they then switched to Dave Rennie. And so he got the job, obviously. And he must have found out that I'd been pushing him with the board. So he rang me one day when I was still with the All Blacks and said, I hear you pushing me for this job, blah, blah, blah. And he said, why don't you put your money where your mouth is and come and work with me? And I was giving up I was going to have a break from the All Blacks anyway to 11. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, but after the World Cup, I was going to have a break. And Mum and Dad were getting a bit older. They live in Pataru. And Trish and I had talked a lot about perhaps moving back up there for a while. So I said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea, Dave. And so it was a catalyst for Trish and I moving up. And probably 3 of the better years of my life as a rugby coach. It was magnificent because we came into a team. So straight after the World Cup, essentially, we started training. We didn't have a base, so nowhere to train. The union or the club, the franchise, owed quite a bit of money, and a lot of it, I think, was to the Hamilton City Council. So we weren't using the stadium anymore. We had to look around town to see if we could get a training venue until we could find something or some place that we could train and use as a base. So St Paul's Collegiate allowed us to go and use their cricket pavilion. It was summer holidays.
Okay.
They were coming back on January the 25th. I'll never forget the date because we had to be out of there by January 25th. And everything was, our team room was the cricket pavilion. We had everyone crammed in there, you can imagine, for meetings. We had one whiteboard, but it always had the doctor's notes on it. We had a broken projector or a projector with a broken screen. We had nothing. Like, it was unbelievable. And we'd lost quite a few players, you know, the Muliainas, Sivivatus, those sorts of guys had gone. We had a younger group coming through. Luckily, with Dave Rennie, Tom Coventry and Andrew Strawbridge, while I was with the All Blacks, I'd been scouting a lot and they were involved in NPC rugby. And so they knew all the young guys in the country. Ren's had won world titles with the under-19s and then under-20s. So the scouting was good and we had some really young players, but they weren't at the fitness level that you'd expect sort of all professional players to be at. So we had a hell of a challenge on our hands. We decided no cars at the Chiefs. We were all going to have bikes because it's another way to get fit. It's another way to get together as well. And then, so we started this training. We were scouting another place that we could develop as a training base. And Tom Coventry said his father was retired, but he was like a caretaker at a Ruakura research station, and that there was a warehouse, an old meat warehouse there that we might be able to have a look at. So that's what we did. We had a look at that. And Dave Rennie's got this really imaginative brain. He could see, we could have like a gym down here. We could have the medical team could go here, changing rooms there, and we were sort of all trying to picture this way we could create the space. We had Richard Kahui, who was a builder. Bradley from the number 8 from Matamata, Alex, he was a plumber, so they were able to help. We didn't have any money, but of course we had to get builders involved, so probably went further into debt. And by the 25th of January, we moved into our new base. Now, it was pretty rough. Our great manager, Stu Williams, brilliant man manager and brilliant guy. He'd found some grey paint from somewhere, we think probably from the Navy. And so the boys had to paint the place. It was all the same colour, all grey. Stu had gone into agricultural research area, and he'd gone into it was no longer being used, and he went into an old milking shed and found all this equipment like desks, old whiteboards and that. So we commandeered those into the place and we set it up in some sort of fashion. The ground wasn't good enough to train on after probably March because of the rain, had no drainage. So we'd have to meet for breakfast in town and Stu would stand up on a table and go, today we're at Hamilton Boys High School, man. So off we'd go, we'd ride our bikes there. That's how we started. And we wanted to connect the community. We wanted to connect to the tangata whenua, the Tainui who had settled the area. and we did it under Dave's amazing way of thinking. We did all sorts of activities that linked us to our whole community. We changed our names. The names of all the words around our game were changed to Maori names, so only we spoke them. It was just fantastic. You have to read my book when it comes out. It'll explain a bit more.
For sure.
But it was just a fantastic way to establish a winning franchise, a winning club, and everyone bought into it. And as you saw the results, we just became fitter than everyone else. We had nothing, but we had everything, because we had boys that were empowered, totally accountable for setting up the club with us, and weren't going to let it slip.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. I wonder if hopefully there's photos in your book of what that shed looked like before you converted it.
I don't think there are. No, there are. There aren't. But yeah, it looks better today. I'll tell you that. I think when we won our first championship that year, 2012, I think we were able to pay back the money that was owed, and plus had some left over. We were able to get drainage for the ground. And then over the years, as they've been successful and had good crowds, been able to redevelop what we did initially. And it's a bit flashy these days, man. It's got some bit better equipment in it. And we just about had train wheels as weights at one point. It was that bad.
Sheesh.
But just shows you don't have to be flash to be successful. And often not being flash and having to work for things creates your team, and that created our team.
100%.
Exactly. Well, speaking of successful, in 2015, we head to England for yet another Rugby World Cup. We rolled through the French in the quarterfinals, came up against a tough South African team in the semis, and then in the final against the Aussies, where we won 34-17 and lifting the Rugby World Cup. What was that World Cup campaign like? And, we were the first country to win back-to-back Rugby World Cup, so what was that expectation like?
We had a great team. If you looked at that team, we probably had the greatest team in history. I mean, there would be some arguments around 24 Invincibles and Fred Allen's, 67, 68, 69 team that created the sort of the game that we play now. But we had a great team. We had Richie, who was on two legs this time, Centurion, Tony Woodcock, possibly the best loose head in history for the All Blacks, Centurion.
Local legend.
Kiwi Milamu, Centurion, one of the great hookers of all time. Ma Nonu became a Centurion. Mills became a Centurion during the World Cup, and Conrad Smith on 95 games. And so these are some of the greatest players in history, all on the same team, with other talented guys like Dan Coles coming through, Bowden Barrett coming through. We still had Sonny Bill Williams to complement the midfield. We had Ben Smith at absolute peak. Jerome Kaino was probably the best player in 2 World Cups.
Yeah. 2011 especially.
He was that good. Yeah, he was that good. And he still said it when he finished with the All Blacks. I remember having a cup of coffee with him, and he still said, "I didn't make the jersey better, Smithy." I go, "What? Who'd you get the jersey off again?" And he said, "Jerry Collins."
Oof.
So that was the way. Yeah, but it's what was clearly pushing Jerome to be the best. So we had an incredible team. We had guys that didn't play much who added hugely to the team. Liam Messon was a great example. Added massively to link our Māoritanga stuff with who we were. We changed the haka. We already had Kapa Opango, but we changed the formation of the haka, and it was just a great World Cup to be on. And to go into that quarterfinal against France and have an opportunity as a coach to right or wrong was pretty important. also some of the players that had played. Daniel had played in that 2-7 game. Richie, obviously. It was a pretty big occasion for us, and probably one of the most complete World Cup playoff games I've ever seen or am aware of. So it was pretty special. South Africa was tough in the semi-final because Pollard, I think he kicked 5 penalties, and the other 10 that came on kicked a drop goal, which kept them in the match. But they didn't really threaten us with any tries, and we scored a couple of tries and deserved to win that match. And then Aussie, the only blip we had in that Aussie game was a yellow card to Ben Smith, which put a bit of pressure on us. It always fatigues you particularly when your fullback goes off, because your wingers have to work, together the whole time. And Nehi Munaskada was doing so much work. We had Jules Severe on the other wing, and because Munaskada had played a lot of fullback, he took a lot of that role over of covering both sides and covering the wing as well. He was phenomenal. We were just under fatigue when we got back to 15 men, and then we kicked away again. So it was a great tournament, totally different to 11. I remember going back to the hotel. We're in that really flash hotel that England uses as a base. When I say flash, it's flash. There's butlers around every corner. Oh, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Anyway, I wanted to have a red wine and a cigar to my old mate Jock Hobbs. So I went into the boys were, they were all celebrating and that. I just wanted something quiet. And I went into the bar to see if I could get a cigar and a red wine. And they said, you can't smoke on the premise. I said, really? Not even outside? No, I don't even smoke, but, I would have had one with Jock if he was there. And they said, I'll tell you what, we'll get you a golf cart. There's a golf course there as well, of course. Got this golf cart, and I was allowed to sit outside in the golf cart with my bottle of red wine and have a cigar and get my old mate Jock. So that was about it for me. And then I went to bed. The next couple of days were a bit hectic, so I was wise enough to get to bed earlier. And then we came back to New Zealand. And it was surreal being able to go back to back.
Yeah.
And not have all the trauma of 2-11. I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was easier given that we had all those great players and great coaching team, good staff, really experienced staff. That All Black staff so experienced. Pete Gallagher, the physio, is probably 20 years there, hugely experienced, worldly, has mixed with all the best sports physicians in the world. George Duncan, who's a muscle therapist, who's also outstanding and different to every other team, what he does. Gilbert Anoka, who's with us for years, has been still with us. I've hardly coached a team without Gilbert Anoka, actually, starting with the Canterbury Bees in 1989, Canterbury B and Canterbury 7. I had to call him a masseur back then, lads, because the Canterbury Council would never have let me have a sports psych back in the 80s. And so, he was my masseur, but he was taking sports psych sessions back then. Boys had what we called, just our exercise books, and they'd take notes before training, and off we'd go and train, and we'd put the stuff he was teaching us into training. And this is really revolutionary. So he'd been there a long time. So we had incredible staff. Mick Byrne had come back as a skills and kicking coach for us. Ian Foster. Ian Foster is a really hard-working, dedicated, assistant. I haven't seen him as a head coach, but I bet he's the same. Yeah. A lot of detail, works well on the computer, great analyst of the game. And then you've got Steve Hansen, who had the education of a coach from the age of 1 right through till now. A lot of nous, great understanding of the game, understands people, And I thought the mixture of us was really good. You know, we gelled really well, just like Ted and Steve and I had. So yeah, it was a really enjoyable 3 years. I stayed on until 2017, and really enjoyed it, and really enjoyed 2016 because we lost all those Centurions.
Yeah.
And had to have a whole new leadership group. And Steve created a mindset of how do we get better. So it wasn't how we're going to replace Richie, Dan, Kevy, Ma, Conrad, Mills. It was how do we get better now, boys? How do we use this to our advantage? And so 2016 was a phenomenal year.
Yeah.
When we equaled the world record of 18 wins in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said, in 2017, you stepped down from the All Blacks. So over 200 games as a coach with a record, like I said earlier, of 184 wins, 21 losses and 7 draws. Out of all of the wins, the finals, the trophies you've won, is there a match that stood out to you amongst all of that?
Several. I don't know if your figures are right. I don't think
I got them from Wikipedia, so I'm hoping they're right.
I think they'll be involving my games that I played in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say. I coached a lot, obviously. Games that stood out to me, there were some pivotal ones. So 2004, when we decided to bring that leadership group in, it was prior to the end of year tour. We were still so against Italy and Wales. And then I'll never forget the game at Stade de France in Paris against a really strong French team. And I remember Tony Woodcock being thrown in for his first start against Peter de Villiers, who was known as the best tight end in the world. We had a young team, but man, we took them apart that day, 45-6 or 45-6, I think. It was a phenomenal game of rugby, and it created a picture of how we wanted to play, how we wanted to be, and it led into 2005, 2006 when we were putting teams away with massive scores, and it was backs and forwards working together, and using the defence also to create turnover ball or force the other team to kick so that we could counter-attack. I was in charge of counter-attack, and in those days you never really trained it or you had systems for everything else, but there were seldom, I didn't know of any systems for a counter-attack other than some stuff that Barry Bracewell had taught me when I went and saw him back in the early 2000s. And so I was working really hard on what makes up a counter-attack and what are the movements and how do we turn it into like efficiency as the key rather than flair. And so if you watch really good counterattacks, it looks like flair and all-out attack, but it's really not. It's just being efficient, getting into the right positions, and having some idea of how to hit open doorways and all that sort of stuff. And so we were working on all that. And it was that they were really important years. Another game that stands out for me, there are 3 or 4 that do, but another game that stands out to me was the Lions' second test in 2005.
Ah, yes.
That was best performance you'll ever see from a 5'8" in your life.
Yeah.
And Daniel Carter, but he can't do it himself. And we actually went down on that test. They scored the first try. But yeah, the boys were phenomenal that day. It was just beautiful to watch, beautiful rugby, massive up front, backs and forwards linking, and just took them apart. So that was really important. That led into another Grand Slam for us in 2005 at the end of the year. And then in 2006, we played France on Armistice Day. And you know what that's like. It's a massive occasion. And in the past, the French had been winning those games, Armistice Day or Bastille Day as well. They're really difficult. we played them in Leon, and I think it was Carl Heyman was saying when they lined up against the French in the tunnel about to run on, the French were yelling at them and pretending headbutts and all this sort of stuff. And the boys said, Carl Heyman turned around and said to them, "They're in for it today, boys." And out we went. We won that 47-3 on Armistice Day in Leon. And if you ever get a chance to have a look at that game retrospectively, we got criticised a bit afterwards by the media because we only had 37% of possession and the same amount of territory. I said it's because, like, honestly, we were scoring from our own 22 often, and we went in their territory. You can't make anything of territory stuff. And we would score really quickly. So we were trying to score, Eddie talks about scoring in 3 phases. We were, all those years we understood the data and knew that you were more liable to score early in the phase count. So we were just bang into the phases and we'd score, come back, they'd kick to us. And when they had possession, they'd go like 15 to 20 phases. So it made a real point to me that you can't put too much weight on possession stats or territory stats.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's how you use the ball that counts.
Yeah. That sounds like an entertaining game. I'm sure it'll be somewhere in the archives of YouTube. I might actually look that up. That was 2006, right?
2006 Leon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, awesome. Well, you've obviously had a lot of success in the men's game, but you decided you weren't done giving success to New Zealand rugby. In 2022, you coached the Black Ferns, 12 out of 12 at the Rugby World Cup. What was that experience like at the World Cup, and what was the Black Ferns environment like in general? How was that challenge?
Yeah, it was a phenomenal experience for me. I had no idea I was going to be coaching the Black Ferns moving into 2022. I talked to the coaches. They'd had a really difficult tour at the end of the year, as you know, had a couple of big losses against England, a couple of big losses against France. But there were reasons for it as well. That they came out of COVID, they hadn't put a lot of work in. Whereas the other 2 teams had been professionalised for like a year or 2. We were still amateur. So there were a lot of reasons for it. But unfortunately, that player, Takuta Ngata Arangamate, she had a difficult situation on tour with some of the staff and the coaches. I'm just going by what the report said. And when the team got home, put up a post on social media about this, about her mental health issues. So New Zealand Rugby kicked into gear, employed a couple of lawyers to help put a review together. And when it came out, it was pretty confronting, the review, pretty damning. Now, I wasn't there. I know the coaches well. It didn't really sit well with me because I know who they are, and I couldn't imagine that if they did create the issue, then they definitely wouldn't have done it on purpose. And maybe they did some things that they thought were funny, but actually weren't funny. I don't know. But anyway, I then got a call from Mike Anthony, the high performance coach, to see if I would coach the team. And I said, no, look, I'll help the coaches. I'll be a support for them. I'm happy to be a coach mentor. So I went down to the first camp and the review came out. And so some of the coaches resigned on the spot. Some of the staff resigned. Glenn Moore, who was head coach, was absolutely affected by it. You could tell. Felt really sorry for him. He was stuck in the middle of it. As head coach, you always got to take the responsibility, and it wasn't nice. It wasn't a nice period. So that first week, I sort of stepped in and coached every session. Had Wes Clark, who had been in the team previously as a defence coach. So he was staying on. He was happy to stay on, and so he did a couple of sessions as well. But 2 days before that, I'd applied for the pension, and I hadn't been coaching out on the field for a while. I came home and I had laryngitis. I could hardly speak. I was exhausted, and I said to Trish, my wife, I don't think I can do this. And she gave me a big hug and she said, "You got to do it. Like, these girls deserve to have a coach. Someone's got to do it." I said, "Oh, well." So in the meantime, Glenn, who was head coach, he decided the right thing to do was to resign. And so I ended up head coach and director of coaching and director of rugby, which is definitely not what I was looking for. I had a lot of fortune and Wes Clark joining me because I'd been sort of mentoring Wes since my Chiefs days when he was a young coach. So we got on well, and he liked my defence system, and so I knew that we'd get on famously with the Black Ferns. Whitney Hanson, I already knew, obviously Steve's daughter. Now she went from being a one-day-a-week intern on the tour to being head forwards coach. So that was us, the three of us. Then we managed to get a commitment from Mike Cron for a couple of days a week, who's the best forward coach in the world, has been for a long time, possibly the best coach in the world. So Mike Cron, being Mike Cron, instead of doing 2 days a week that he was contracted for, he did every day of the week. So he came on every tour, was there for every game, was there for the whole World Cup. So he became a massive part of it, and he's a great mentor for Whitney, who is still, she's a very smart woman, a very smart coach, Whitney. But still need, you still need guidance from other mentors. And so he was just brilliant. I got Alan Bunting. Luckily, I'd been talking to Alan Bunting, had to go through a bit of a process to get him on board, but I wanted him to take over the culture and leadership side because I was doing that as well. And I was really struggling with, I had all these balls in the air. I was doing Zooms with the leadership group. We were trying to put something in place in that area, and then same with the coaching group. And so he came in, and it was a stroke of luck, I think, getting him because hugely experienced at, he'd won for years with the Sevens team, great at creating an environment where there's strong social capital, where there's vulnerability and the players are prepared to speak about difficult things. So he and I managed that initially, and then he took over that area and just basically reported back to me and told me when the leadership meetings were going to be so I could be there. And he was a great help. And we managed to get Ted on board as an advisor, both a player advisor and to help the coaches, any of the coaches if they needed a hand, but also as a, what would you call them, as a link to World Rugby. If we wanted to meet with a referee or want to talk about laws or go to a function, he was available. And with his reputation, it gave us a really good look and gave us respect from World Rugby. So he was really valuable. He loved the whole experience. The girls loved him. In fact, at the last training run before the final against England, one of the girls put a big whiteboard out on the field with a big heart on it to Teddy Bear. And it was a love letter from the girls to Teddy Bear. It was a brilliant environment. It was different. It took me a while to get used to it. Hopping on the bus to go to a game when you're with the boys, it's sort of like this with the earphones on and, everyone's quiet and you're in your own space and you're going over the game, or as a coach, going over what you're going to do and the warm-up and all that sort of stuff. Go on the girls' bus, they got speakers that big. I've never seen such big speakers. and they pump it out, the music, they'll dance, they braid each other's hair. And it's all about excitement and joy, and not a lot of nerves. Even when you get there and when you warm up, it's still a sense of excitement. They get back into the changing room, get the poise out, and bang, they're out into it. And so it's different. And I've been interviewed a lot, and I've seen this statement before many years ago, interviewed a lot about the difference between the boys and the girls. The simplest way to put it is the girls have to feel good to play well. The boys have to play well to feel good. It's just slightly different. Not one's not better than the other. It's just the way that they've evolved. But hell of an enjoyable. And you can see with the women, it's only just been professionalised, our game, and I think we've got 35 contracted players now. But at the time, I was bringing in these young girls that weren't contracted. They all work. You know, the captain, Ruahei, is admitted to the bar as a lawyer. So is Grace Steinmetz. Tanya Kalunavali, the tidy props, a civil engineering student. You've got the Bremner sisters. One's a teacher, one's a corporate worker. Jonah Nanwu, the girl that won the ball in that last line out against England. She works for MFAT, has advised Prime Minister on strategy. These are smart women. Yeah. And because it's a bit like us in the old days, you know, because you're working and you've got family and you're not getting paid to play, you know, it becomes an exciting thing for you. It's a joy because you've worked so hard to get there and you're going to make the most of it. You know, whereas in professionalism, it's changed the game slightly there. The other thing with the women is, you know, when we have kids as men, we just keep playing. It doesn't really affect our career, other than we're probably there for the birth. But, you know, we're still allowed to play rugby. With the women, you imagine it's way more difficult. We have 2 mothers in the team, and so you've got to organise your programs so that they can have time with their partner and the baby or the child. One of them was a bit older. These are great mums, great partners, great husbands, or wives. You know, the family get totally behind these girls. It's been a family affair. Yeah. So it's very much, I'd say it's like it was right up till the late 80s for men. You know, very similar to when I played, where you got to work and play rugby, and it's a game that you just want to enjoy. So yeah, from that point of view, it was very, very special. They're dedicated. The girls knew that we had to change the game, and I wanted to play an all-out attacking game because I just wanted us to have fun. You know, we were so far behind England and France. I thought, let's just make it exciting and play a game that suits our DNA, that's attacking. But then you've got to. It's all very well to say that, but you've got to have the techniques, the skill level, and the understanding of the game to be able to play that way. And so that was our project, really, 7 months of creating activities and games at training that pushed us to use skills that were relevant for an attacking game, all that attacking game. So being able to pass closer to the opposition, everyone coming forward, playing on top, making sure that after the pass we could block a defender. You know, all sorts of little things that are really important. Worked a lot on counter-attack. We scored a lot of tries off turnovers and kick receipts in the tournament. So we worked on that. Everyone knew exactly what they were doing, how to get quickly into position, how to get an open doorways, what to look for, you know, just do the obvious and do it quickly in counter-attack. You know, because some defenders are always going to make a mistake. The defence, you know, someone's going to step in, and that's where you've got to be ready to hit that hole, and then you're away. So that's how we worked. Wes did an outstanding job on defence, and of course we had a couple of great forward coaches, best in the world, and Mike and Whitney, very smart and got on really well with the women. And the women were dedicated to learning. absolutely dedicated. So you'd hop on the bus from training, and one of the girls would get up on the mic and go, "We were shit today, girls." 7:30 upstairs on Smithy's tactical mat. We'll just go through those plays that we mucked up today, and that would be their evening. Absolutely dedicated to getting it right. Yeah, so it was a phenomenal experience. I had very little expectations. I didn't know whether we were going to be any good or not, but I do remember saying to the girls, my very first time I spoke to them, "We're going to win the World Cup at Eden Park in front of 40,000, but we're not going to win today. We've got 7 months, and we're going to work bloody hard." And man, they worked hard. Our training, so the GPS figures are obviously really important today at training. Most of our backs were up to probably the same level as the All Black backs, close to it.
Wow.
From my time in the All Blacks, in terms of their distances run, but also in their high speed meters that they run. They're up around 1.2, 1.3 kilometres in a training run of high speed running. Cool. So tight forwards, not quite so much, but they had to get way fitter to play the game that we wanted to play, and they dedicated themselves. It's phenomenal how they dedicated themselves to be able to play an attacking game and be a part of that. And so instead of just putting their head down and smashing into tackles, they played with their chins off their chest, their eyes open. They could, if the pass was on, they'd make it. If it wasn't, then they'd look for an offload. If that wasn't on, they'd pop off the ground. If that wasn't on, then we'd go to a ruck. So it's slightly different. It wasn't just going to a ruck. And that's how we played. There are a couple of quick stories about that. Just before the World Cup, we played Japan at Eden Park, and there's a bit of a wind coming down the field. I said to Ruahei, the captain, before the toss, "Wind's quite strong at the moment. Why don't we take it, Lou, if you win the toss, and because it's going to die down the second half." And she looked at me like I was mad, and she said, "Hell no, Smithy. If we win the toss, we're going to take the kickoff so that we can attack." I thought, there's my girl. That was a great attitude. And then the other side of that coin was we worked on it so much that in the tight situations, we still couldn't not see the attacking situation, the attacking opportunity in every situation. And so the end of the French game, we got a penalty. We probably should have just kicked a touch into the corner and driven it, and we probably would have won that game quite easily. But we tapped and went and got turned over. And then did the same in the English game in the final. We had an opportunity to kick for touch, 2 minutes left. Ruahei would have put it down in their 22, our throw to the line out. There's no way England's going to score from there anyway. If they do win the ball, they can't drive that far. And so Ruahei lined up for the kick, and we had a call that we'd used all year called Find It, which meant if we lined up a kick to touch and someone saw the other team start heading back to where the line out was going to be, we'd tap and go. And so someone yelled out, "Find it," to Ruahei, and she tapped and went. But it's the wrong call because the defence hadn't moved. And then we got turned over again, and then the rest is history. So, there's a bit of luck at the end of both those games. And both those teams that we played, outstanding teams. Slightly different. France play slightly different rugby to England, but they're outstanding teams. And I guess, you need a bit of luck to beat great teams. And that's what we had. But, I look back and I think we deserved it because we'd worked so hard on changing our game and on playing a game that worked off number 8 wire. And, if we made mistakes, she'll be right. We'll get it right next time. Basically like the people who settled this country, our DNA.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that name Ruahei, you mentioned, just my quick claim to fame, played a lot of representative touch with her at high school level, and you could tell she was pretty special back then, the same sort of ball skills and talent as everyone else in the field. So, yeah, to get her into the Black Ferns was something I didn't see coming, but, she fits in there as a great leader. And, another great leader for the All Blacks, Richie McCaw, 148 All Black caps. and the first ever rugby union player to achieve 100 caps as a captain. What were some of your favourite experiences as a coach around that player?
Oh, look, he did so many amazing things that in the coaching box you just shake your head. Just the fact, for example, that he was able to play on one leg and win a World Cup in 2011, and then he'd put the moon boot on again on the Sunday and have the rest of the week in the moon boot with that fracture. Says something not just about his physical toughness, but his mental toughness. I always remember him telling me, like, he's very smart, very academic, and he was really gutted in the fifth form at school. He was sure he got 100% for school C maths. I don't think we mind me telling this story. And the paper came back at 99%. And he was sure that he got 100, so he sent it back in for a recount. It came back, no, we never give 100% in maths, 99%. I think he's still gutted about that. But it shines a light on how smart he is, and academically, but also in the game. And that mixture of his toughness with that smartness is just unbeatable. He's incredible. In the final against Australia in 2015, when Ben had been yellow carded, it puts a lot of pressure on your defensive system. And we had a scrum, it was Aussie ball down on their 22, and it was sort of middle of the field. And we hadn't adjusted that well. We should have actually moved DC over to the open side and just tried to shore up on the blind side with what we had. But I had this concept of changing pictures before the ball went into scrums or lineouts. So we'd set up a certain way, and then as the ball was about to come in and the other team would look in at the halfback, we'd move and we'd change the picture. But we got caught in that situation, and I forget who it was. I think it was maybe Beale or Drew Mitchell. One of them made a break out just out of their 22, and it wasn't looking very good. He got to about the halfway back to our 10-metre line, got tackled and turned over on our 10-metre line, and it was Richie McCaw that got from the side of the scrum and got around and pinched the ball at a ruck. Now, I don't even know how he got there.
Yeah,
it's mind-boggling. I have to go back and have a look at it sometimes to make sure he was in the scrum. But that's probably the best way to sum him up. He was like an extraterrestrial. He had extrasensory perception to where the ball goes. Sometimes I felt the ball must have had a GPS unit in it, and it was attached to him, because he just had this incredible innate ability to be where the ball was and then make the right decision when he was there.
Yeah. Talk about his toughness. He survived getting dropped on his head as well. I mean, yeah, he's made of extra
That's
tough
a
stuff.
carry got him, eh?
Yeah.
It's carries. That was dirty.
Yeah, that's right. He did, and yet Craig Cooper gets the brunt of all that.
Yeah. I mean, there's been plenty of guys who've had a crack at Richie McCaw.
Yeah, but it's only Quaid that gets it.
Now, obviously, you played as a first 5'8" throughout your playing career, so you can appreciate a good 10 when you come across one. And in my opinion, we had the greatest to ever do it, and Daniel Carter. What were your experiences like coaching, Dan?
Yeah, I think with guys like Daniel, Andrew Mertens, who I had in Crusaders, who else? Carlos Spencer, brilliant.
Cruden.
Even when I played, Cruden is another one. And even when I played with Foxy, it's not so much coaching them, it's a sharing of ideas. And you got to be open as a coach to accept that you're probably going to get more ideas back than you give them. And I think you've got to have a mindset that is ready for that. So with like Mertens was another, intellectually he was another Richie McCaw, really. And I was lucky to have him as a young coach, who knew how to run a game. And I was just, he would say to you that he never taught me anything, but he never knew what I was picking up from him, and you share an idea, you usually get 5 back. And you don't have to use them all, but they're all part of that widening your experience and finding different decisions to what you would normally make, based on what you've learned. And so, he was one of those. Carlos, obviously, with his flair and his innateness. I learnt stuff off him. Aaron Cruden, he ran that Chiefs team really as a tactician. For a young guy, had amazing technical brain and tough. He was tough. There were no holes around him in defence, that's for sure. Plus a tough runner with the ball. And then you come to Daniel, and I've just written a book with Phil Gifford, and it's probably in there. I tried to explain about the things I learned from him without him knowing I was learning from him, but just little parts of his game about how he wanted clarity of calls so that he could play fast. He didn't want to have to think too much, so he wanted things to be sharp, and then he could just play and know what the call was going to be. Just little things like that. He what else? There were a couple of other things. Like defensively, again, he was tough. He was like Cruden, and then over the ball, he was like Richie McCaw. He was obviously he's a good-looking man, but he was tough.
Yeah,
like he'd put his head in anywhere, and he just had this innate ability to do incredible things at the right time. I remember a game against England at Twickenham, and it was down on their 22. Millsy had come in just outside centre, and so he would have only been, I don't know, maybe 20 metres from Daniel. And Daniel didn't think he'd get the pass there, so he did a little crossfield kick off the outside of off the inside of his left foot, straight across to Mills, and Mills caught and scored under the post. Like just things like that.
Yeah.
Just used to blow me away. Yeah. And then it makes you think maybe we could bring that in a bit more often. That sort of play. Yeah. So I learned a lot off all those guys as a coach, and just stored stuff away. One of the other things, Daniel, you didn't want to make him look for too much, because you see nothing, basically, if you try to look for everything.
Yeah.
And it makes you sluggish, and he wanted to be fast. So making sure that others were looking in their areas and giving specific calls to made him a better player. I was picking up all those sorts of ideas that helped me through my career. And as I say, initially with Grant Fox, when he came in, he was my understudy in the All Blacks 84 and Fiji. I remember for his first game, I cleaned his boots for him because I knew he was going to be a great of the game, and I knew he was going to take over from me, and pretty quickly. And so it was just a way to say to him, welcome to the black jersey. And I think I was saying to him, you're going to be the guy. And so even on that tour, I was experienced All Black. He'd just come in, learned a lot from him around the way he read the game, and obviously his individual training that he did outside of the team trainings was phenomenal. I never kicked so much in my whole life as I did in those training runs with Grant Fox.
Well, it's obviously worked because the man had a golden boot, and we've never had a problem sort of filling that position at first five. We've had some legendary ones, so you've had a chance to work with a lot of them, and man, absolute privilege, I'm guessing. And looking back at your career, coaching wise, is there a result that you'd want back, perhaps? Something you could change?
Oh, there were a few in that 98 Crusaders. So we had a reasonable year my first year in 97 because I'd got last in 96. We had a reasonable year my first year. I think we got sixth. We were pretty close to making a semi, actually. We were a bit unlucky. In 98, we were really, really confident that we were going to have a great year. And then after 5 rounds, we were dead last. 5 rounds of a Super 12. I remember looking at the table, and I think the Sharks were on maybe 21 points, and we were on 5 down the bottom. And not only that, we'd just lost to the Blues, and then we had a bye, which made it look even worse. So we'd had 4 games in a bye, and there's only 7 games left, and we're dead last. So yeah, that was probably the most difficult period of my life, and I was genuinely thinking about, would I go teaching? Would I become a sales rep maybe? Work for a company? I wasn't too sure. But yeah, I was pretty sure I was going to get the sack. And then things changed. Changed with a small win at Lancaster Park, I think, against the Bulls. Then a bonus point win against Brumbies down in Timaru. And then we just couldn't lose.
Started rolling, yeah.
And I don't know why. But anyway, we started winning, and I didn't have to go teaching again.
Yeah, you broke us Blues fans' hearts in the final.
Oh, man, I remember, like, as a coach, when you go out to greet the boys and you got media shoving something in your face, honestly, I felt like I was floating that day out on Eden Park, because it was just so unbelievable, coming from where we'd come from and how much we'd had to fight and how much criticism we were getting. And for me personally, I'd have notes put in my letterbox. I had one note that was so abusive. And then at the end, because we were sponsored by Ford, and I had a Ford Focus, I think, at that point in the driveway. And after all this abuse, it said at the end, anyway, Holdens are better than Fords. Now that hurt. That really hurt.
So that's where the abuse came from before social media, was it? Little notes in the letterbox.
Notes in the letterbox, yeah. Or even on the street.
Yeah.
You know, on the street. Kids definitely at school getting it. I had to stop my wife and mother-in-law listening to sports radio, because that was, in those days, that was really vindictive.
Yeah.
Like that was really tough. And I had a couple of my players, Tobo Mitson and Justin Marshall, had to go on, or they told me this, they went on, talked back one day to put a few facts right about me. They said that I was getting absolutely killed. And so they stood up for me. But they weren't easy times, those. And yes, so you ask about, is there one loss? There's a series of losses that put us last at round 5 of the 1998 competition.
Yeah. Talkback radio, the first element of anonymous trolls, right?
Were they anonymous?
Yes.
Though?
Oh, yeah. Well, I suppose, to everybody else listening, given a fake name. Yeah.
And it was just relentless, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like, it'd go on for hours.
Yeah.
It was relentless. I had to be on them the odd time, because you get told by the media person you need to actually go on social media and on Talkback and answer some of the questions directly. And man, that's really confronting, because you're just getting it from all sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big beast. So you've coached a lot of players throughout your career, and of course a lot of All Blacks. Is there someone that you've had in your teams that stood out to you as the perfect coachable player?
I get asked this a lot. In fact, Steve and Ted and I have just done a program on Sky on our best ever 15, which is impossible, but we're able to discuss different players. And we were pretty close to the same team, actually, but they had to be players that we'd seen. Yeah, look, I've got a player I've been through a lot with, and I look back at his teams, he's seldom lost, and he's not the star that you think I'm going to say, but it's Andy Ellis.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah.
And so Andy Ellis, whether it was Canterbury Crusaders, was part of winning cultures. It wasn't until we brought him in 2007 that I actually understood why. He's a giver. He's obviously a good player. Understands the game well. Coaches the boys away from the coaching. So he's probably the best assistant coach I've ever had. He'll toe your line too. So he'll want to understand it, and he'll go and sell it to the boys. When he came on in the final in 2-11, Pity wasn't quite right. He'd hurt his groin in the warm-up, Pity, and we probably should have replaced him, but we thought he'd be okay. But anyway, when Andy came on, I got the referee recording off Joubert. We were at a function together, and I asked if he had it. He sent it to me, and it's phenomenal. If you want to listen to a halfback running the game, you should listen to that. Particularly in defence, where he had everyone organised, on your feet, hands out, give a metre. He was pulling guys over. He was even pulling Richie McCaw and putting them over there.
Awesome.
He ran that game. That last 20 minutes, he ran that game. Probably another one who you could hear a lot was Andrew Hoare, who'd come on. So they were amazing at keeping that team not focused, but settled and confident and playing within the laws so that we didn't give away penalties. And then since then, I've had Andy Ellis at Kobe along with Daniel, and we won the Japan Championship in 2018 and 2019. But not only won it, but we won the final 55-5 in 2018 against Suntory, against Peter Jones's team, and the second final we beat Kubota 43-7, and Andy played. Daniel had a crook neck at that point, so Andy played PS5 in the semi-final against Suntory and played the final against Kubota at halfback. And then the last story about him is in the 2018 final for Kobe, he never got selected. We had a Japanese halfback, and I had Adam Ashley Cooper, and actually Dave Dillon, who's coaching at Highlanders, he was my head coach. We had Adam Ashley Cooper and Daniel Carter as our two foreign cap players. So there was no spot for Andy, who was actually the captain of the team. And a lot of people would spit the dummy, wouldn't they? Not Andy. So at our last training run on the Thursday afternoon, he would have done 50 metre sprints up the field just to show the boys that he was with them. And he was giving everything. If he was needed, he was going to be there. Yeah, so I would say, look, it's hard I could go through 20 guys, but he really stands out. And then he retired from Kobe, came home, joined New York in the MLR, and what'd they do? Won a championship.
Yeah. Looked like he was having a hell of a celebration in the streets of New York as well.
Yeah. The other thing about him, I just wanted to mention, was Emma, his wife, is as good with the wives and the families as Andy is with the team, and so it's a partnership.
Yeah.
Oh, very
and
nice.
everywhere you go with those two, you've got happy families and you've got a happy team.
Yeah.
And that's a key to performance.
Yeah. Now, obviously, we talk about the players that you've coached, but is there a player that you wish that you could have coached and you never got the chance to, and who would that player be?
Well, Graham and I always thought that Adam Ashley Cooper was probably one of the best players we'd ever coached against. And getting to coach him was I probably would have said him, but I got to coach him at Kobe. So
yeah,
and he was just as good as what I thought he was as a person and a player. and very similar to Andy Ellis. They combine well together, those two. So Richie Mo'unga probably for me.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have been involved with Richie Mo'unga. I think, he's a great of the game. I think I don't think he's given that accolade as much as, say, Daniel Carter. And probably with him going to Japan, he may not ever get it. But the first time I saw him live was when Crusaders played the Chiefs. It was maybe 3-4 years ago. It was when Aaron Cruden played his 100th game, and I was there to present an award to Aaron. But I saw Richie Mo'unga play live, and it was magical. And I hadn't seen anything like that for a while. He was really, really special. Probably him. He would have been one that I would have loved to have had an involvement with.
Yeah.
Particularly as I was a 10 anyway, with nowhere near the ability that he's got. But he was another one I might have had to learn something off.
Yeah, he casts a pretty big shadow, old DC. It's going to be hard for someone to sort of surpass that legacy. It might take a few years while DC's memory, I don't want to say fades, but kind of, becomes something of the past. But
and it's not just here, is it? I mean, it's globally.
Yeah.
You see every time there's a world team name from whoever around the world. Even Johnny Wilkinson picked him as the greatest first five in history. So you can't get much better than that.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, we've got the World Cup coming up soon, and as I'm sure you're probably aware of, I'm guessing you're picking the All Blacks like all of us here. Is there a team you see? Who's the team that you see as the biggest threat to us?
Clearly France.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think having them in our pool is really good, I reckon, because it separates us.
Yeah.
My gut feeling is that we'll play the final against France.
Yeah,
We'll
I've
end
got
up
that
going
too.
all the way through. So they're clearly going to be a threat. It's whether mentally they can handle it. I think even they have those doubts. Pressure at home. They've shown in the past they haven't been able to handle it. I guess at some stage you get over that and show you can handle it, but at the moment they've got that that reputation. I'm interested to see how Ireland go, because they've never made it past a quarterfinal, and that's a big hurdle, I think, mentally for them. And they've got to get out of a group with South Africa and Scotland and Tonga in it. And I'll tell you what, you look at the lineup of Tonga, Samoa and Fiji now, they are going to, I would say one of them is going to make a splash somewhere.
Yeah, I've got Fiji. I reckon Fiji will do some things.
Yeah. I watched them against Japan the other night. Because they could have won by 50.
Yeah.
They against Japan, Japan were down to 14 men, which didn't help. But they were fantastic.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, we'll go into our listener question section. We've got a question here from old Trey Wells. He wants to know, as a coach and your involvement in rugby championships and different competitions, do you know how much collaboration with coaches and players goes into new things like rule changes, team expansions, those sort of bigger decisions?
Yeah, I think through history, the All Blacks have been the best at. It's a wee bit like yachting, like the America's Cup used to be, where you got up in the crow's nest and you looked at the horizon and checked the wind change, and then you had to make decisions before the wind actually changed. And rugby's like that, and I think New Zealand's been the best at that. Like 1905, when the originals went over on the boat to Europe, Dave Gallagher, the captain, he read the law book, and he saw that there was a loophole in the laws that allowed a player to play in a position that could either be in the forwards or the backs, depending on where he wanted to be. And so he turned it into the wing forward position, and Dave Gallagher played that position. And that's where our innovation goes back to. It's looking ahead to how can we change the game here and advantage ourselves. And I think if you go through history, whenever there's been a massive law change, the All Blacks have always been the first team to adapt to it and create a new way of playing that's going to be advantaged by the law changes. And I gave that example of Graham Henry and Steve and I in 2009, where we stayed true to what we thought was going to happen, and it did happen, and it advantaged us. So, that would be my answer there.
Nice.
We're the best, I think, at looking at what we think is going to happen. When I was coaching Crusaders, I had what I called a futures group. So I had some rugby people I really admired as thinkers. One was actually in the UK, and they would report back every month on where they thought the game was going. And I wanted some of the trends from up north. So we would have a quick catch up every month and talk about the game, where we thought we could make a couple of tweaks because of how the trends were going elsewhere, and tried to stay ahead of the game that way. So it's something that I've always tried to do.
Yeah. Our next question comes from Matt Clark. So this is actually about a local player from our local club, Silverdale. And how do you compare Luke McAllister with some of the best who have done it? And what stood out to you about Luke?
Yeah, so Luke, I remember watching Luke at school, and he was just hugely talented. He could do virtually everything, Luke. Had a smart rugby brain on him. Physically, like, he was really quick. He was solid build. Could play 10 or 12. Could kick either foot. Was a good goal kicker. He had everything, and that was at school level. It's hard to rate Luke because I think we all thought he was going to be a long-term All Black superstar.
Yep.
And he got thrown into a couple of games. I remember the third test against the Lions in 2005. We replaced Daniel Carter with him. Daniel had a slight injury, so Luke came into first five. And he had a fantastic game, Luke. Set up a try with a little kick through. He was always a real threat as a runner. He played, I remember us playing him second five, I think that year against Gitto for the Wallabies, and I thought Luke outplayed him. So he had versatility. As you know, we went from that 2007 final. People say that was wrong. I don't agree. We had two great options in Aaron and Luke, and maybe Aaron's experience might have made a difference. But yeah, Luke was an exciting player that we thought was going to have a huge career, and then he left to go overseas, which sort of made it stutter a wee bit, his career and the way he's thought of in New Zealand. I think really highly of him. I like him as a guy. He worked hard, hugely talented. Yeah, I thought he was going to be a great of our game, but it didn't quite turn out like that. But man, he had pretty good career overseas as well.
Yeah. Did he ever substantiate any of the rumours about how hard Charlie was on him growing up as a schoolboy to you? We've heard stories of Charlie making him run home from a loss. Did he share any of that with you?
No, not really. I knew Charlie pretty well. Actually, I remember playing against Charlie, and he carried me about 10 metres down the middle of Lancaster Park as I held on to. I only just got my arms around one thigh.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say anything bad about Charlie.
Yeah.
No, he's a local legend here as well. Coached Silverdale Rugby Club a little bit as well. So
That's right.
We don't talk bad about him.
Probably got your arms around them, but I'd be surprised if you were able to lock them. They were that big.
Yeah, no, couldn't lock them. He actually tripped over me in the end, but it must have been 10 metres.
Yeah. Oh, counted as a tackle? Still a tackle in the stats?
Exactly. Yeah.
Hey, you mentioned something about finishing off a book as well, but what does the future hold for Wayne Smith going forward, in both rugby and in general?
Well, so I've got a club in Japan, Kiboko Steelers, that need a bit of a hand now and again. Dave Rennie's going there. I think you probably know that. So he'll be there next year. So I love that. I love the place. Trish, my wife, loves it as well, Kobe. So I'll keep doing a bit of low-key sort of mentoring there. I've also got a contract with New Zealand Rugby to, I don't even know what the word is. It's not really an advisor, but share ideas, I guess, with Razor, who, as I've talked about, we get on particularly well. We don't always have the same way of thinking, which I think will be good.
Yep.
You know, we'll challenge each other. So that's one of my jobs. Another one is to do the same with Alan Bunting, with the Black Ferns and his coaches. The coaches for the Black Ferns this year are outstanding. They're, Mike Delaney, who was head coach of Bay of Plenty, Jacko from North Harbour, you know, who gave up being head coach of North Harbour to be forward coach for the Black Ferns. So you got these real quality coaches. Tony Christie from Christchurch. Got these quality coaches helping Alan Bunting. It's really good for the women's game. So giving up head coaching roles in NPC to come and coach the Black Ferns, I reckon that's phenomenal. So I'm helping them. In fact, I'm going over to the Mount tomorrow, have a session with Bunts and Mike Delaney, just have a chat about how things are going. I'll cut a few clips. I'll cut a few clips from their tour and we'll have a chat on that. So, yeah, I'm just going to do that sort of stuff. Nothing sort of semi-retired, willing to help where I can.
Yeah.
But, yeah, want to get away at times as well.
Fair enough. Well, that concludes all of the questions that we have for you today, and we're looking forward to, obviously, I'll be getting my hands on that book once that comes out that you've written. And
well, that's 3 sales. That's good.
Yeah. So, yeah, again, thank you for your time speaking to us today, and we wish you all the best moving forward and look forward to seeing what happens with results and whatever you touch moving forward.
Cheers, lads. And Sam, you said that it's going to be 40 minutes.
No, we've run quite over. I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you, Smithy.
Thanks, man. Okay. Catch you later. Cheers.